Welcome to the IREC Radio Videocast podcast show. Hat Friday. Only Norrie hasn't worn one. However, he is the man that hands out the sanctions. Yeah, he's got a good excuse. We've got Norrie Stewart, we've got Phil Attridge,
Hi.
we've got Jimmy Hutton and myself, Stuart Lochhead. Today, we've had a long chat before we even started today, deciding what not to talk to you about. We shall cover the presser in a very brief way. We've got James Mathews of Sky appearing to deliver a bombshell on Sky TV the other night and suddenly vanishing. We might have something to say about that. Nissan might come up. We've got Phil with an opinion on the Scotsman change of ownership might have affected what it's reporting. We've got the Spectator in London and the way they describe everything that's happening in Scotland. I think Norrie might get excited about that. And we might even cover the reasons why you should or shouldn't go with a list vote different from the SNP. Look, it's me to start. I'll tell you what I thought about the presser. There was a little bit of the race, who's doing better at the race to get the vaccine done across the different countries. I wasn't impressed by that. I was impressed by the fact that when the First Minister was asked about when are care homes going to get their second vaccination, because it would appear that the protection that people are getting from one vaccination is not working. And the thinking on that seems to have changed in the last 24 hours. The First Minister she kind of batted that away and said, no, it's still 12 weeks gap now, which I was a little disappointed with, simply because the other news was that it's different. We also heard that children are not immune from long COVID. Well, that was actually somebody else, but it wasn't on that topic. I watched the BBC intro, which is the 15 minutes before they go to the presser, to get a feeling what way the BBC are going to present the presser to the public. And it wasn't too bad because it was Graham Stewart and not that. Oh, well, I was going to say something rude about Gary Robertson.
It's an interesting point in that, Stuart. It's the first time I've heard people refer to long COVID in a way that maybe they should be referring it to, because it might make the British public sit up and take notice. They were telling us that many of the symptoms of long COVID and how it's affecting people are very similar to ME, or what used to be called back in the day, yuppie flu. And I know a couple of people with ME, and it can devastate your life. So maybe that's an angle that the press should be pushing to make people sit up and take notice a bit more.
I think that was Graham Stewart, who he was talking to a doctor in London and a pediatrician, Dick Sani. Excuse me if I sound that wasn't able to pronounce that properly. To be honest, that discussion was possibly more interesting than the presser itself. Anybody else want to comment about what they got on the presser?
Well, they're still going with the vaccine thing, as we mentioned earlier when we had our green room chat. You're allowed to compare figures between England and Scotland when England are apparently winning. But as I predicted yesterday, I'm pretty sure when Scotland catches up with England, and England still hasn't done as many care home residents and staff as Scotland, you'll not be allowed to do any comparisons.
Yeah, it seems that comparisons are strictly allowed only if you're Conservative. You can compare Scotland to England all the time if you're part of the Scottish Tory group. Jackson Carlow's been doing it all week. Well, I didn't really think it's him, it's whoever runs his Twitter account, because I'm pretty sure that's not him. There's no profit in Twitter, there's no paintings to be black, he'll not be doing it. But yeah, it's interesting how they jump up and down the minute the First Minister in the chamber ever compares Scotland to England, and that's all they've been doing all week.
I was disappointed when Paul Hutchin turned up. I was expecting something. I mean, he's a senior. Is he the editor now?
Stuart,
Well,
other than Paul Hutchins' kids, I think the rest of the world's disappointed when he turns up, mate.
I expected fireworks because he bothered to turn up.
He turned up with his tail between his legs because it was the record that ran. Nicola had the decorators into her house.
All right.
It turns out it's no her house. She's staying at her real house, not Bute House.
Yeah,
And the work being done was health and safety work.
Was it? I was going to say it'd probably be the National Trust that would actually get the painters into Bute House.
Apparently, it was cornices coming down.
Oh.
And they had to get it fixed in some security work, she said.
A damn fine plasterer if they're in need.
She got the chance to answer that before Paul Hutchins got to ask a question.
Excellent.
There was another question on kind of a bit like that, having a go at the First Minister about care homes. There is now a police inquiry going on. 474 care homes are being examined. The question was from Dan Rivers. Who does he work for? Can't read it. Will any ministers been questioned about the scandal of the care homes deaths?
No, the question was, if the poor wee hands-on people that know about it because they work in a care home are being questioned by the police about individual care home deaths, why aren't ministers being questioned about individual care home deaths, even though they'll know nothing about it?
That's a pretty standard, low standard. Aye.
These are inquiries into individual deaths.
Mm-hmm.
No into strategy or policy.
And she said, I can't comment on a Crown Office investigation, which immediately reminded me of the controversy about the Lord Advocate, who leads the Crown Office Prosecution Service, because he's in her cabinet. So, you know, that's no get out from, yes, she's probably right to point that out. Officially, that's the situation, but, you know.
She's commented on plenty of Crown Office investigations in the past, just the ones that suit her. Oh, that's me getting better.
Yes.
You're actually going to have to come up on Sunday with a list of them, Jimmy.
Aye, okay.
Because that's her bog standard answer to every question about police investigations.
But it's not a police investigation, is it? It's a Crown Office investigation. Crown Office have directed the police to look into it. Well, like you say, individual deaths. I'd imagine they're looking at, for example, the debacle on Skye, which Highland Health Board managed to contain and managed to sort out, but that was entirely at the direction of a private care home that, frankly, acted in a disgustingly cavalier manner by shipping bloody staff up for, was it Kent? Wasn't that far south, was it?
I think you're right, but they ended up having to take over the running of the...
Are we not going to let Phil say anything today at all? I think it's a good idea, like.
No.
I think if Phil's got plans to tell us about his noticed changes at the Scotsman. Do you want to tell us about that, Phil, please?
But just so when I watch and listen to the broadcast every day, I'm listening to the First Minister that's doing their job. Then there's all this monstering around it all the time. And it's always trying to tie it down with something else. And personally, compared to the other half-wits that are running other parts of the UK, she does a competent job. But it seems to generate so many stories about somebody just telling you what's happening. So it's really difficult unless you're into the nitty-gritty of who hates who and all the rest of that there. You know, it's not a lot to comment on it otherwise. But if you want me to talk about the SNP with the Scotsman,
yeah, come on, go.
A couple of articles yesterday. And the first one's SNP figures, that's the senior figures in the SNP, are happy with one thing: Labour in chaos. And then it starts, again, its subhead line is, how do you go from being the biggest party to a bit part player that draws laughter and pity rather than fear? This is by Conor Mashet. Now, I could read the whole thing, there's no doubt, because after reading it again, he's actually taking the mick. He's telling them they don't need to go for the short term. They need to look for the long term. And he's telling them how to actually get noticed and recognized in a place that they ran forever. And other than that, so it's just made me wonder about the Scotsman's bias, right? That's having a go at the Labour Party in Scotland. And then we get another one having a go at the Tory Party, which is Westminster is parking its tanks on devolution powers. Another one, the Scotsman. And reading this is Westminster coming up, taking us over again. So it's definitely changed, I think, with the new, subtly, it's getting there, with the new ownership of the Scotsman.
And so been a change of editor.
Well, it's the owner that calls the shots.
I don't know if the editor's changed, but it's an international group that's bought it, isn't it?
Yeah, and they'll be looking to boost it. And
well, the easiest way to boost it, given how low their figures are. I mean, I think we've seen something about 13,000 copies, 11,000 copies or so. The easiest way to boost it is, quite frankly, even a slight hint towards maybe accepting that when over half of the population support independence, that running anti-independence stories is not a good thing for a newspaper to do. No. They didn't need to move anywhere towards having an independence position, just not be quite so anti-indie.
Yeah.
What about, did Johnston Press go with the Scotsman, or did they divide it up? The Johnston Press group? Did it all go as a winner? Because the Johnston Press had an awful lot of titles, regional titles as they're called, all right across the UK.
I think it was just the Scotsman.
It's just the Scots. Johnston Press has basically gone out of business, so people are hiving off wee bits out here, there, and everywhere.
I think they got about 10 million for the Scotsman. Think about it, the Scotsman. You know, when you
have you noticed that?
Building costs.
Well, I've got evidence that this might have changed. If you use Google and you stick in a Scottish story, you want to find it, and suddenly you get a list of all these English regional newspapers covering it, the same story. I think that's probably from the days of Johnston Press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason it's at the Scottish story is in an English regional paper is because they need to copy.
Do you not remember when David Lynsey for the Herald was the political reporter on basically every single newspaper in the land?
Right.
Because his stuff would pop up in all these regional papers.
I mean, that's how they've managed to consolidate down their costs in the inky press. To be honest, in recent years, they're just obviously digitally save money, but also consolidate, because they've gone digital. They can consolidate their their copy.
The Scotsman's tiny now. They've got one floor of Orchard House.
And you think of that lovely grand house at Holyrood that is now Rockstar North is now there.
Yeah, and Rockstar North got a knockdown price as well.
Jimmy, tell us about Nissan and what happened there.
Well, that's an interesting wee story that I think Boris will be running with, because it sounds, on first look, it sounds like a positive Brexit story. Nissan are delighted with what's happened with Brexit, with the deal that the Conservatives have done. Just when you go and take a closer look at why they're delighted, that you realise it's a very selfish viewpoint that Nissan have taken. They make the batteries for their cars at their Sunderland plant. So that's given them a massive competitive advantage over every other car manufacturer trying to sell into the UK market, because there are going to be massive barriers for others bringing their battery-powered cars in here. So basically, over the next few years, almost every electric car you're going to see is going to be a Nissan, or perhaps one of those Peugeots, the pesky Peugeots that they're going to rebadge their own cars with. But as I say, it's not a Brexit Plus story at all. It's a great story for Nissan, and frankly, this is the bribe that they got. It wasn't a cash bribe. They've got an absolute 100% competitive advantage over every other car manufacturers in Europe. That's why they shut up during the Brexit campaign and allowed Boris to go along and get what he did.
I thought there was £80 million floating about for them as well, Jimmy.
Oh, there might be. I've not seen that part of the story yet, mate. 80 million.
Because if you remember way back when this was first talked about before the Brexit referendum, the Tory government denied that they would be subsidising them in any way whatsoever. In fact, I think it was the same minister in charge as is now, who has just admitted that, yes, they're giving them a wee backhander. But they're not building their new model here. That's still going elsewhere.
What about, what have they built? You know, they're talking about free ports, establishing these free ports. Presumably, there'll be one in the Newcastle area. Maybe they'll put Nissan inside the free port.
It'll be Sunderland, mate. And if they put them into the free port, that automatically means that there'll be another fiscal advantage to Nissan. So I'd imagine, given that they're talking about 12 free ports, I'd imagine it's an absolute certainty that Sunderland or Tyne and Wear will absolutely be one of those.
Actually, this actually just sounds like a brilliant bit of karma to me. So there's these Asian companies coming across here to get a nice, docile, compliant, subjected British public shoved basically behind a fence and told to work. Give it another 50 years, they'll be jumping out windows over here, you know, other than China.
Well, particularly when they scrap the working time directive and the boys are doing 4 12-hour shifts a week.
Whoa. We definitely said we weren't going to do that before the Brexit.
Not until the Brexit was done.
We said we wouldn't do that.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Phil, you're not strictly accurate because there's at least 50% French money running Nissan these days.
Well, that's all right. They won't mind having to go.
Renault are the big investor.
Don't talk about French money or you'll get me started on the Channel Tunnel and whether or not the trains are going to stop in 4 weeks. And we didn't want to go there yet.
That is hilarious.
Oh, it's brilliant.
The Channel Tunnel company is French. It's French, but based in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's French, the British government won't give it any money. Because it's based in Britain, the French government won't give it any money. So they're just going to backfill it.
Do you think there's a chance that a Chinese company will buy up the Channel Tunnel for about £4 and a couple of fish suppers?
I would think I'm not sure about the fish suppers, mate. They'll be worth a great deal more in the short term.
Depends on whether or not the fish are happy or no.
Oh, happy
fish supper.
Shouldn't laugh really, but I mean, you can't really help it. I mean, all this thing that was forecast, and actually it's coming out worse. The amount of company in Europe that just aren't going to trade with this, they can't be bothered.
I was going to say, Phil, Project Fear sounds like a dreamland compared to what we've actually got. Sunlit uplands. I didn't think we can see the uplands and the sun's certainly no shining on them.
And
tell me about Ruth, Jimmy, because you'd mentioned him in the green room.
Oh, Ruth, the bold Ruth, Ruth the Moose, aye, who was it yesterday? Everything, so much has happened. I think it might have been yesterday where she decided to tweet that EUOB are planning to have a static, well, depends on timing, of course, but they intend a protest outside Queen Elizabeth House, the government hub in Edinburgh. And Ruth
UK government. Well,
Queen Elizabeth House, it's not going to be the Scottish government. I do apologise.
Okay.
UK government hub in Edinburgh. And Ruth the Myth decided that a protest of that type, a flag-waving nationalists outside a government building, she compared that to what happened in the Capitol with Donald's idiot troopers who tried to take over the Capitol building. I've no idea where she was going with that. She's kind of got lucky in that everything else that's happened since, it's died a natural death a wee bit, which is a tad of a shame.
Where did she say where they were getting their arms from, their Kalashnikovs?
Well, I thought they would find them inside Ruth, mate, if she climbed off the top of that tank that she's usually got clamped between her thighs.
Oh dear.
Dear.
That's a picture that'll never ever go away for me, you know. Ruth Davidson on top of a tank, Ruth Davidson on top of a buffalo.
Well, you're
I mean,
forgetting.
seriously, I do hope that buffalo got counselling after that. And
You're
Willie
forgetting,
Rennie.
You've got to give her proper title. She is Baroness Colonel Ruth Davidson. Excuse me.
She hasn't given us the joy of announcing her title yet, because I can't wait to hear that one.
Oh, no, she is a colonel.
No, I'm saying that her title. She's not decided what she's going to call herself.
That would be another bit on her name.
Baroness Tory Trout. That sounds about right.
Is she not from somewhere like Leven in Fife, or where's the other?
Baroness of Tankerton.
Oh God, Tankerton. Don't upset the people of Tankerton. That's down
Baroness Buffalo Smuggler
in Lanarkshire, isn't it?
What about just Baroness Chieftain? Something like that. Pick a nice big tank, you know.
Well, I saw a good piece in a piece in the Times by normally a Spectator writer whose name I've forgotten.
James Forsyth.
James Forsyth. I listened to a podcast, the Spectator podcast, because I like to know what the enemy's up to. And Fraser Nelson and Mr. Forsyth are quite often on it, talking what I could only describe as bollocks about Scottish politics. This piece, though, it sums up what the Tory faithful want Boris to utilise as tactics when it comes to IndyRef 2. We had George Osborne earlier in the week writing in his own paper suggesting that Boris just says no.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Forsyth is suggesting that what we need is a Royal Commission. He even quotes Harold Wilson in his piece. Harold Wilson basically said that Royal Commissions last minutes take years. So effectively, it's kicking the ball in the long grass. So at the moment, their only strategy is to do something to delay.
Yeah, and frankly, that will absolutely suit Boris, because Boris's only desire around Scotland and Scottish independence is not to be the Tory Prime Minister that loses Scotland, that watches the breakup of the United Kingdom. So if he can kick it into the long grass, that's exactly what he's going to do.
I mean,
the added wrinkle,
a perfect vehicle to do that, isn't it? That's what they always do.
The added wrinkle to it is that it's not to be about Scotland and its independence or otherwise. It's to be about the whole UK.
Yeah.
So in effect, we're going to be asked to accept a Royal Commission totally dominated by the elephant in the room, England. So any decisions that come out of the Royal Commission will be for England, not for Scotland, Ireland or Wales. And we're supposed to suck it up and accept that as inequitable.
Yeah. As I say, I had a look at that article, mate, and I've noticed somebody on Twitter's already pulled James Forsyth for his framing of the article when he talked about Nicola Sturgeon's demands. After the election, if the SNP have won an outright majority in the Scottish Parliament, it won't be about Nicola Sturgeon's demands. This will be the freely stated will of the people of Scotland in an election. So he's telling Boris to completely disregard what the Scottish people have just voted for. And why is he doing that? Because he's English Prime Minister. He doesn't need the seats. He doesn't need our votes.
Okay, well,
they can do exactly what they want.
Jim, they could say but that's why the framing of the manifesto is very important, to give it extra edge.
It's the thing you're going to get from England. Scotland's 40% of the land mass, 5 million people. And it's also the northern defence of England. Mm-hmm. Yeah, have a look at all our listening stations. Who's the enemy? They're going to come from the east, okay? The first land mass they hit when they come around Norway, Scotland, and then coming through. That's what any commission or anything will do. It'll be driven by security interests of England, and also somewhere to park their subs, their nuclear subs.
I thought the tanks as well. Didn't they need to park the tanks somewhere?
Well, and you're right. It's about English safety, 1 from invasion and 2 from nuclear holocaust.
And
the other interesting thing about the article was He suggested that the Scottish nationalists would be accusing Boris Johnson of being anti-democratic. I like the idea that we would actually have to accuse him of being anti-democratic rather than simply point out that he is anti-democratic.
Yeah, aye. Rather than point to the internal market bill and what have you, is absolute guaranteed examples of his anti-democratic principles.
The other thing that was repeated was the only legal way to get a referendum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't agree with that.
Well, I'd be interested if the day ever comes that England wants a referendum and Scotland decides they can't have a Section 30.
Aye.
Mm-hmm. It's, I mean, he says here, however, there can be no legal referendum without Westminster's consent. Yeah, right.
That's just the line that every English commentator, whether they're an English commentator or a Scottish commentator living in England, but that's just the line that they pump out in every piece because they're desperate for us to believe that that is true. And
the trouble is, we've got people, in fact, including SNP MPs. Tom Arthur, is it? South Renfrewshire.
Yeah, he just made an arse of himself.
Use the term, don't like us to point out to the people of Scotland that if that is the case, then we are no better than a colony.
Fair play to Tom Arthur. I've never heard of him.
Oh, he's done well.
The first time he appears on the radar, he's making a big horse's butty sale in front of the entirety of the Scottish electorate. Well done, Tom.
That's why you've never heard of him.
Aye.
You mentioned nukes there, Norrie. As of noon today, nukes are now illegal across the world, according to the United Nations.
Does that mean we can arrest everybody at Coalport?
No, because you can't get in over the fence.
Oh God, that's a fence and a half.
Aye.
Legal, illegal is completely irrelevant as a term. It used to be legal to do all sorts of hang, draw, quarter, burn people alive, keep slaves. It was all completely legal. So, yeah, and things that were really good were illegal, you know. So you just want to do things right. It's just legal, illegal. That sounds like the Tories. It's legal to this.
I'm presuming you're not talking about arson here. You're talking about holding an independence referendum. Is that right?
No, it's getting the thing strategically right rather than legal, illegal, i.e. doing it in a strategic manner where they haven't either got any option or you've got a fait accompli. And if you just look around over history, sometimes that can be a bit messy, bit dodgy. Now and again, it's kind of clean.
Do you think if we crowdfunded about 80 million, we could get Nissan on our side? Maybe that's all we need to do. All we need to do is bribe the Tories at Westminster. That's how they got Scotland.
Do we need to send a friendly AUOB march to Newcastle and invite them to join an independent Scotland? And we'll have to get in Sunderland as well, of course.
I really don't think Liverpool and Newcastle will need any encouragement.
Yeah, I think you're right, mate. The changes that could happen in this country, in the United Kingdom, if Scotland actually manages to gain its independence, would be massive. And frankly, that's the biggest reason why the Tories oppose it. The Tories are specifically designed to maintain the status quo, to maintain the position of people in this country, to maintain the rich and the landed gentry, and to keep them in the style to which they have become accustomed. That's why that party exists. And frankly, the fact that they dress it up in English nationalism, I might hate it, but it's a clever way to do it.
The next referendum might be particularly interesting. We could find ourselves arguing for what was the status quo.
Well, I'm going to ask you guys, because all of us here must have visited Newcastle in that area more than once in our lives, because we don't live that far away from there. I used to go there quite a lot when I lived in Galloway. In fact, I used to go there every week delivering. I never noticed any antipathy, because I was Scottish and opened my mouth. It was all very friendly down there. Whereas in the south of England, that was a different thing.
Yeah, but they do say a Geordie's just a Scotsman with his head kicked in anyway. You know?
Well,
actually, I'm not using that for the headline.
What Geordies say is a Scotsman's just a Geordie with his head kicked in.
Yeah, exactly. So they're brothers and sisters.
I've never found any part of England that has, if you like, a separate identity. Liverpudlians, the Cornish,
Manx.
yeah, they all have like a separate identity from their English identity, and very few of them have got a problem with the Scots. I've only really come across it in London.
Yep. Get it
And
a lot.
frankly, Londoners hate everybody anyway.
Well, they do.
They hate each other.
Anybody from the north.
Well, I don't know. Half of Londoners were born somewhere else. So,
Aye.
Yeah.
well, I used to my late brother, saying that in London, and he was on the barrows, and you'd listen to him, and you say, "You can't say this." He says, "Well, I'm not racist or anything. I hate everybody." You know what I mean? And he says, and you have a brilliant choice in London if you hate everybody. You know, you've probably got people from at least 3/4 of the planet living there.
Yeah.
Aye, it's a fabulous melting pot for a misanthrope, that's for sure.
Very expensive place to live, especially if you're poor.
Yeah.
True.
I
Right,
lived
can we
there
get
3
to this?
times, but after about 5 years of occasionally living there, I decided I'd never live there again because it's just.
Oh, couldn't.
What else were we going to discuss?
We were going to discuss the list vote, and there's a little article here from somebody called Greg Russell, SNP activist. He says, research casts doubts on both vote selection strategy. I know that you've got strong feelings on this one, Nori. Both votes 1 and 2, SNP 1 and 2 is obviously the traditional way to vote. What do you feel about this guy who seems to have come up with a fairly solid explanation why that's a waste? 900,000 SNP votes only got 4 list list MSPs.
The problem is I'm not voting for anybody that essentially I don't know what the policies are. I mean, I won't vote Green. The Greens aren't because I do know what their policies are.
Yes, that's the trouble. He does recommend SNP 1, Greens 2.
Yep, 90 odd seats possibly. 90 odd seats. You didn't really want independence.
I don't like Green policies. I like some of them, but frankly, I don't trust them. You know, I mean, if it was a choice between independence and a hedgehog bridge, it would go for the hedgehog bridge. That's my problem.
When I was saying about a strategy, right? Now, that's a strategy where you sit and work because your main thing is to get independence, because neither the Greens will get their policies or the SNP policies that they really want until you get independence. And if you're looking for a strategy where you're looking for international help, all right, the SNP stick it, so they've got an extra 2 seats, so they still haven't got a majority, and the Greens have got half a dozen. Whereas people in Europe, elsewhere, politicians, they've got 90 odd seats. They've got 70%. That's a strategy.
Phil, can I just ask you, as a Democrat, why you think we should have 70% of the seats in a parliament with 55% of the vote?
Oh no, but that would be the SNP. The 70 would be the Greens, because then they'd get the list vote.
But that's what I'm saying. The parliament's meant to be any parliament, particularly when we look at one which is so unrepresentative, like Westminster. Holyrood is meant to be a representative parliament, and you're asking to get 70-80% of the seats, or 55% of the vote. Because the Greens vote's going to be completely negligible.
The majority of that first past the post, the 50 odd, would be the first past the post. Then
but it's still going to be an unrepresentative parliament. The parties that finish second and third are not going to be represented in the way that they should.
Let's go back to the policies of the Greens, because I noticed yesterday the candidate for Edinburgh North and Leith, our local constituency, Lorna Slater, the Green candidate, she is co-convener of the Greens here in Scotland with Patrick Harvey. So she cast her, it would be her leaflet or brochure online yesterday. I had a look at it. It really puts you off, because it's all about, it's very little about independence. And she's co-leader. So, I mean, it's all about other policies.
Yeah, but I mean, the Greens, I mean, I was quite impressed with the way Patrick Harvey handled his BBC interview yesterday. And, you know, every now and again, I fall into that trap of thinking, no, maybe they're quite sensible. And then they want to do something. They have an argument over something that is frankly just stupid. You know,
Climate change
gonna ground all
is really
planes.
dangerous, but
Aye,
Nobody
grounding all
can go
planes
to
or
work
maybe
unless
leaving
they're
all
on
the
a
oil
bike.
in the water, leaving all the oil in the ground.
You know, I mean, and you think, well, no, you're not getting my vote. And until somebody comes up with a party in whom I have trust and I like that at least enough of their policies, I'm not voting anything but SNP.
I rehearsed
can I
a
just
question I
point-
wanted to ask her. Strangely enough, given that I'm going to ask her for an interview, and it was I was there for the climate change march, summer before last, when there were all the school kids came off school, and I was down there with the cameras. And what I was gobsmacked after going to 2 years of Scottish independence marches, when I got into Holyrood Park, the huge stage and massive PA, and I was thinking, who paid for all that?
The oil companies.
Can we just put this nonsense to bed? The idea of voting for other parties. You can think about it as much as you want. It'll make not a blind bit of difference until polling day. All the hot air that people talk about is moot on polling day, because if the SNP are polling at about 52, 53, 54%, then you can put your second vote wherever you want. They've won the election. They've won the election on first past the post. And your second vote, you can give it to ISP, or you can give it to the Greens, or you can give it to whoever you want. But if the SNP are polling anywhere below 50%, any SNP supporter has to vote SNP 1 and 2 on election day.
Well, I think we're ignoring another issue, because we're assuming that the only division on the list vote will be on the pro-Indy side. We're forgetting that there's the potential for division on the unionist side with George Galloway.
Oh,
The Brexit party renamed the Reform UK Party, Labour, Lib Dems and Tories all fighting for those votes.
Well, the first two that you mentioned, Reform and Alliance for Unity, George Galloway, is nonsense. None of them will poll out with the margin error. None of them will poll over 1%. I will confidently predict that right now.
Not even the Brexit party with all their money.
The Brexit party won't spend any money in Scotland.
That's if either of them actually even register.
Yeah, that's if either of them get to the point, get past
registered.
right now, neither of them are registered to take part in the election.
The more unionist parties there are, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Can we? Aye, I was just going to say, can we get to the biggest story that we've not bothered to cover yet?
Absolutely. You lead it out, Jim.
Nicola Sturgeon, Alex Salmond, SNP Civil War March, I don't know what, 956. Last night we had James Mathews appear in the middle of a programme, actually. They just split to James Mathews on Sky News to give us some breaking news from Scotland, which was about an official employed by the Scottish government who had made an admission, shall we say, to someone, and then wanted that admission changed. They admitted that they'd known about the allegations against the former First Minister at a certain point in time, and then asked whoever they'd admitted it to change that to we're suspicious of it, because that messed up the timelines of all the collusion and corruption that was ongoing.
It was a press release, apparently.
Right, yeah. Well, now 3 national newspapers went with this last night and have since gone all very quiet upon it. Sky News has gone very quiet upon it, and I'm just wondering if there are interdicts and injunctions flying around Edinburgh that we know nothing about. Because it looked like the ball had started to roll down a hill, and then for some reason it stopped rolling, which is very unusual.
We're expecting more revelations. There is Gordon Dangerfield, who's a solicitor advocate, who seems to have analysed all the available public information, legal information. He was interviewed by Tommy Sheridan,
Oh God.
which was published last night, a 23-minute podcast. There's another one to come tonight. Last night, Gordon Dangerfield promised to reveal more information that he didn't publish yesterday. We've got Craig Murray in court next week, making public an awful lot of his defence.
Yeah, that's a strange one with the Craig Murray one. That'd be, as he points out, the Crown Office have admitted that documents exist that he wants for his defence, but they won't allow him to use them for his defence. They are protected documents. We also have the strange occurrence of Police Scotland running about desperately trying to find out who leaked one of those documents, whilst not admitting that that document exists, which is a strange position to take. And I don't know, mate. As I say, there's got to be interdicts or whatever out there to shut this down, because I've no idea why the story would start breaking last night and then just go quiet again, other than there being a legal reason for that.
Well, but one of the things we've discussed every now and again in regard to this topic is, when will the shit hit the fan? We haven't used it in that term, but the question is, when was it really going to break out? Now, the Craig Murray trial, Craig Murray he's become a bit of a celebrity because he's reported on the Julian Assange trials and tribulations. So he's well known all around the world. And he's invited the world's media, John Pilger angle, to his trial. So I can't see the fan is going to be covered in dung.
It certainly begins to look that way. His trial will be interesting. It'll be even more interesting if the Lord Advocate insists on not allowing him to use documents that they admit exist, but are private. The Lord Advocate's got some, I mean, as far as I understand, there is no privacy law in Scotland. So the Lord Advocate looks to me like he's created a privacy law, but it only applies to the First Minister and her senior advisors.
There's digital privacy laws.
And what,
he's using data protection. He's using data protection as a privacy law to protect the First Minister and her senior advisors.
And sorry, my brain's gone there. What I was going to ask, I'm having another moment.
My thing with all this is I don't see how you can get an interdict against the press release.
I think it was a presentation for the inquiry, Jimmy.
No, I didn't think it was for the inquiry, mate. I think it was before that.
Well, it was going to be published, yes.
The article I read said it was a press release.
Well, but I think it was going to be, it was evidence to the inquiry, and all evidence to the inquiry gets published.
Nori, I think it
doesn't.
It looks more and more like what you said a couple of weeks ago is actually true. It's been shamateur from start to finish. They've tried to get Alex to back down and just sit quietly, and it's blown up into all this because these people ran about thinking they were bloody Leo McGarry out the West Wing, and in fact they're clowns. They're amateurs who have no idea what they were dealing with. And it looks to me like Nicola Sturgeon's got 3 Norma Wisdoms and a couple of Calamity Janes running her office for her, who actually think they're smart-ass political operatives and are clowns. I
think they tried to shoot Salmond, missed, and the ricochets just bouncing around, taking them out one by one.
Well, my question that I forgot there was who's the judge? Is it Lady Dorian again?
Yes.
Now, this is a big question.
For what? For Craig Murray?
Yes, because he's up in front of her because she was the judge at which trial? The salmon trial.
That's the rules.
So is she going to be completely independent is the question that I'm asking you guys.
Doesn't
Well,
matter. That's the rules.
You can't believe in Scottish justice and believe in Scotland as a nation with the rule of law running it if you're suggesting that judges are corrupt. I'll cheerfully suggest that there's corruption at the highest levels of politics. I'd cheerfully suggest there's corruption in Chambers Street. But if you're going to tell me that judges are corrupt, then we may as well just all pack up and go home.
I don't think they are. That's my position. What about you, Phil?
Corrupt. I don't think that's
Judges.
the right word. Maybe they're subject to some kind. Sorry, there's a name. I know it's a totally different subject, but when you said about not corrupt, the name that flashed right through my head was a guy called McGrath. So that's another subject. Obviously, Scottish judges.
Yeah, fair.
No, I don't think she's corrupt.
So will she insist on Craig Murray's defence being able to have those documents required?
I think this is a load of pish. I don't think it's got anything to do with Craig Murray's defence. Craig Murray's defence is what's written in his blog and what had been published by other people. It's got nothing to do with anything else.
So do you think he's going to get off?
No, I think Craig Murray's fishing here. I think he's trying to help Alex Salmond out by getting things published. He doesn't need this. What does he need it for? This isn't a conspiracy charge.
A very interesting point, Norrie. Very interesting point.
This is simply, did he disobey the court's ruling by helping to identify the Jigsaw women?
Well, the interesting point there, mate, is that the particular article that they're having a go at him over, you know, the what I seen as a piece of satire when I first read it. It's not the judge who thought that was contempt. It was the Crown Office, and the Crown Office. What's his argument there? The Crown Office isn't allowed to censor him. Had the judge found that in any way contemptuous, she could have pulled him up and asked him to remove it.
Well, my understanding was that it had to be a judge-led thing.
Well, this is it. Even the Crown Office had to apply for a judge to make an order.
Well, I'm not a professional lawyer, so
Yeah,
but
No,
I can't quite understand why it's so important.
I think he's
Craig
got three.
Murray's case.
Nah, I think you're probably right. The documentation that he's wanting is far more pertinent to the Salmond inquiry than it is to his own. I think he will probably win half his case and lose the other half and end up getting himself a daft wee fine or something. I think given the fact that the international press are going to be there, I'd be very surprised if Lady Dorian puts him behind bars.
But it seems to me like the argument he wants to make, God, and this is pure conjecture, folks, is that the alphabet women shouldn't have had anonymity. And this
Well, that would be a very stupid argument to make in front of the same judge that gave them anonymity.
Yeah, exactly. But that seems I can't feel it seemed so black and white. Maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm talking pish. But either you can identify the woman from what Craig published, or you can't. It seems to be as simple as that to me.
I couldn't, but then I'm sure there are others closer to the case that probably could.
Yeah, and actually, with that in mind, doesn't it really matter what other people wrote? Effectively, if he points you in the direction of something that was written and published in the UK that does identify them, he is at fault.
Well, I'm sure we'll get Danny Garavelli's entertained and knowledgeable viewpoint on all of this at the weekend, because
Yes,
she's
it'd
been
be
quiet of late.
very interesting if at the end of the day, Lady Dorian decides that it's Danny Garavelli and Kirsty Wart that need to be done for contempt of court.
Well, it doesn't look like she was particularly willing to pull anybody in for it.
Aye, I'd agree with that. I think it looks very much like James Wolfe is doing the First Minister a favour, but I don't think we're allowed to say that, are we?
Well, he's under attack by Gordon Dangerfield. And do you know this? What
Contempt of control, that's called, Jimmy.
Yeah. Do you
Is
know
it?
how much he supposed that James Wolfe has apparently cost the taxpayer, the Crown Office? It's now up to £60 million.
Oh, so
That's an awful price to pay to stay.
wait a minute.
How
That's
did they get that
nothing.
for? And our 20 million, we could have had Nissan on side.
Yep.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I still think we can make bungs in the right places. Don't see why we can't buy votes. Excuse me.
Yeah, okay.
Votes at Westminster.
Right, guys, we're kind of running out of things we're allowed to say without getting locked up ourselves. Anybody get anything for the end of the show?
And silence was the answer.
Aye.
I think we'll just wind it up there today on Hat Friday. Thanks very much, Norrie Stewart. Thanks very much, Phil Attridge. Thanks very much, Jimmy Hutton. And my name's Stuart Lockhead, and it's goodbye till Sunday.
Cheers, folks.